Evening everyone, this is Shadi Abu Yusuf, and again we're still talking about classroom management, and in this episode I'll be talking about classroom language. So let's see today's question. So the question is, what are the characteristics of good classroom language? And again, let's talk about classroom language and then we talk about characteristics of good classroom language. Classroom language means the language that the teacher uses inside the classroom. Okay, so we're talking here about the kind of language that the teacher uses when explaining to students, when giving instructions to students, when monitoring students, during plenaries and giving feedback. Right, so what are, again a question, what are the characteristics of good classroom language? Let's see. So we would say, number one, accurate. The classroom language that the teacher uses must be accurate and graded and natural and reduced. So we've got four main characteristics of classroom language: accurate, graded, natural, and reduced. So let's see one by one and talk a bit about each one of these characteristics. So we're going to start with accurate. And what do we mean by accurate classroom language? So classroom language must be accurate because again, learners acquire their English from the teacher. And the teacher gives learners good models of English language. So finally, their English becomes better because it's kind of a replica of the teacher's English. And that's why we say that the teacher's language in the classroom must be accurate in terms of speaking and, of course, writing. So when you speak, you've got to use accurate English language. And I mean by this, your pronunciation needs to be accurate, and also your language structures need to be accurate as well when you're speaking to your students. So the teacher's level of English is really important in a classroom because you always set examples and give models of English to your learners. Right. Also writing, because the teacher writes on the board. So if you write incorrect English on the board, that's a big problem because the students copy what's on the board, they take it back home and they study it, and that's a big problem. So again, so we say classroom language must be accurate in terms of speaking and in terms of writing. Lovely. So another characteristic, some back to the four corners. So we said accurate, graded, natural, reduced. And now let's talk about graded. And let's see what we mean by the word graded. Right. So when we say that the classroom language must be graded, we mean by this that it must be adapted. But adapted to what? Adapted to the level of your student. Okay? So you shouldn't be using language that is more difficult and far more difficult than the level of your students. You need to adapt your language so it suits the classroom. It suits the level of your students. So in other words, avoid using difficult vocabulary when you're teaching lower levels. Vocabulary that might be really difficult, okay, and block students' understanding. And also, you need to choose the kind of language that is appropriate to the level you're teaching. So again, appropriate language and adapted language, and I would say simple language in the classroom. And I'm so much against those teachers who try to show off with their English language, and they keep, using very difficult idioms in the classroom and using very difficult expressions for students. Why are you doing this? Your main job in the classroom is to make students' life easier. And you don't make their life easier by using very difficult language in the classroom. Like, why would you say jot down with lower level students instead of write down? Why would you say something like to a lower level, something like, I want you to dot all the I's and cross all the T's. How are they supposed to understand this? Why would you say something, okay, everybody, don't stop beating around the bush? Come on, for God's sake. Avoid using difficult idioms and difficult expressions in the classroom with your students, especially at a lower level as well. And also, keep your grammatical structure simple in the classroom. So when you say to your students, when you want your students to be on a page on the course book, you say, go to page number 5, open your course book and go to page 3, 4. And but why would you say something like, okay, I would be really grateful if you could go to page 9. I would be really grateful if you could go to page 9. That's a very complicated structure here. And think about the word grateful. Do you think that a student at a lower level would be able to understand the word grateful? So again, that's how you need to think about your own language in a classroom. Right. So back to the 4 characteristics. So we said accurate, graded, natural, reduced. And let's now talk about natural. What do we mean by natural classroom language? Okay, and we say natural in terms of structure. So in the classroom, your language, your English language as a teacher, has to be natural, which means that you need to use English as it is used in reality. Don't just say, oh, my English is accurate and the structures I'm using are accurate. It's not about accuracy all the time. It is about whether this is actually used in reality or not. For example, why would you say something like, must I do this? Must I do this? Well, I mean, when you say must I, well, I mean, that's a question. And again, we would say, grammatically speaking, that's an accurate structure of a question using must as a modal verb. However, do people say must I in reality, or do they say should I? They don't say must I, but they say should I. So again, make sure that the structures you're using in a classroom are accurate structures. Also, think about pronunciation. And again, your pronunciation has to be natural in the classroom. And I mean by natural, it needs to be a representation of what happens out there in the world. So do not make your language too easy so that it becomes unnatural. Yes, we would like simple language to be used in a classroom, but still keep your pronunciation natural. Okay, so someone might say, but Shadi, how can I make my pronunciation natural and at the same time grade my language? Think about this one. You need to speak in chunks and pause after each chunk of words you use. Like you might say something like, okay, everybody, I want you to go to page 5, look at the first question and read it carefully and answer points 1, 2, and 3. Now this is natural pronunciation, and I try to pause after each chunk of words so I give some time to students' mind to process what I'm saying. But it would be wrong if you do it this way. Look at this, so you say, okay, everybody, I want you to go to page 9, look at the questions up there, and then I want you to come on, for God's sake. Grade your language, okay? Try to pause a bit after each chunk of words and give time to students to process what you're saying. That's what we mean by grading language. But still, you need to use natural pronunciation in the classroom. So don't be unnatural, like don't speak like, I want you to think about all the ideas. Teachers who speak like that are using completely unnatural English, and this is something that we don't recommend, we don't want to see. It's absolutely wrong. Right, Now, so let's move now to another characteristics, and this time we're going to talk about reduced. And what do we mean by reduced language? We mean by reduced language that the teacher in the classroom, you are the most professional speaker, and it will be really a tragedy to be the only one given the opportunity to speak. Students need to speak more than the teacher in the classroom because they need to be given a bigger opportunity to practice English because they need that, not the teacher, because the teacher is the most professional person in the classroom. And this will take us to what we call TTT. And TTT stands for Teacher Talk Time. And we always say that we need to reduce teacher talk time. Why we need to reduce teacher talk time? So that we give more time to students' talk time. And this means that when we're presenting language, we need to be careful of how much time we spend on language presentation. So we try to finish our language presentation kind of 5 minutes and then get students to check their answers together. We try to elicit from students instead of telling them all the time or speaking all the time. And because when TTT is so high, the classroom becomes really boring. So again, reduce your TTT and increase your students' STT. However, when we say TTT, we always talk about unnecessary teacher talk. Because again, some teachers think that they need to shut up completely in the classroom, and this is not right. Because again, as I said earlier, the teacher is the most important source of listening for students. So again, there is what we call quality teacher talk. This is when you're presenting vocabulary and when you're presenting grammar, because this is needed talk here. So what we're against is unnecessary TTT. It is the kind of talk that we don't want in the classroom, right? But QTT is the quality teacher talk. It is when the teacher is giving information to students. It is when the teacher is given feedback, error correction, okay, during plenaries. It is what the teacher, for example, says, what the teacher says, when he's monitoring students in an activity or something. So again, that's what we call QTT. So in order to sum up and get back, let's have a look one more time. So again, 4 main corners here. Classroom language needs to be accurate. It needs to be graded, natural, and reduced. Now, someone might ask, and Shadi, how will this affect our performance on professional teacher training courses? And again, I always give an example of CELTA criteria by the end of every episode. So let's do this time. And when we look at this criteria here, which is 2A, it says adjusting their own use of language in the classroom according to the learner group and the context. And this is about classroom language, adjusting, using appropriate language, adapted language in the classroom according to the level of your students. And another criteria, which is providing accurate and appropriate models of oral and written language in the classroom. So again, classroom language would affect your assessment on professional courses like CELTA, CERT, TESOL, you name it. So thank you very much. We came to the end of this episode. And again, you can contact me via the following ways. www.shadi.blog, that's one thing, or me, you can send me an email at me@shadi.blog. And again, if you like this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, leave your comment, and activate notifications. Thank you so much. It was lovely being with you again. Bye bye.